Welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast, where we identify God's uncommon work in common life. Recognizing God's work requires intentionality, but articulating it motivates and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe to never miss an episode. On today's episode, I have a conversation with Sara Dittner, who is the director of an organization called Transitions DMC that works to help people when they find themselves in difficult situations. So let's get into the conversation with Sara. Sara, thank you for being on our podcast today, where we explore a service that our community has called Transitions DMC. Can you explain what it is and how it got started?
Sure. So Transitions was founded in 2016, so we've been around about 6 years or so. In the beginning, we helped the poor and homeless in the community in any way that we could find. The first services offered were we collected donated furniture, and then people who had nothing were able to come, and what we had, we would turn around and give it back to them. That program really took off, especially when we had some of the hotels in the area do some remodeling, and they donated tens of thousands of dollars worth of furniture that we were able to just turn around and give out to people. So that was a real blessing. And that's happened a couple times, but there were also a lot of individuals and some businesses and such. Some of it we were able to keep for office furniture, and so that was everything that we had in the building pretty much has been donated through that program and then future donations. And the reason we got started, also in the beginning, we did a lot of people who had nowhere to sleep. We put them in hotel rooms, try to do apartment deposits and things like that. Craig Fenton is our board president, and he's the founder. He's told the story a lot, so I feel like I can repeat it for him. But he would see on Facebook people talking about the homeless issues and seeing a homeless person that needs help and all of these other things. And he said, well, somebody needs to do something about this. And so he thought about it, and he was praying about it, and he realized, I am somebody. So he started, he would pay for people to stay in hotel rooms and things here and there. And he decided that there was a more economical way to put his money to work than the hotels. And so there was this lack of availability in the homeless shelter in Burlington, because we have the Burlington area homeless shelter. Frequently full. We needed more capacity. And around that same time, the Bridges Out of Poverty training first came to Burlington. They held that at the West Burlington School. And that's actually how I met Craig. This was back in 2016. He sent out an email to everybody, saying, I see this problem in our community, and we need more capacity to serve homeless people, because we have, even in Southeast Iowa, there's not a lot of assistance. And it was interesting that the timing, I think was definitely the Holy Spirit working, because I see this email, and it was at a time where I was working at the Salvation Army. I did emergency assistance there, and I ran the food pantry, and so we did some small scale assistance through that program. And then I did the Pathway of Hope program, which I believe they're still doing there, and that helps families. And I would have so many people that I knew were sleeping on the streets, in somebody's garage, moving from house to house. And I really had no resources to direct them to at that time. There was no, I've got somebody who literally has nowhere to sleep tonight. They're going to sleep in their car in the park until the police tell them they have to move, or something like that. And that was really hard for me, and I was very distraught about that. I prayed a lot about that. And then I get this email from Craig Fenton, and I said, I need to be a part of this. Whoever else shows up, okay, but I need to be a part of this. So I kind of did it a little bit as my capacity as an emergency service coordinator there at Salvation Army, but it was really more of a personal, my own time, my own mission for what we were doing. So I ended up on the board of directors in the beginning, and still working with the Salvation Army, trying to help coordinate how those two organizations were working together. like I said, we did a lot of the furniture stuff. We did a lot of hotel rooms, deposits, first month's rent, utility assistance, travel assistance, just about anything that anybody who needed any kind of help, because they were not necessarily homeless. It was primarily homeless, but really anybody in poverty as well. And then we got to a point where we had to replace our director, and a lot of prayer and a lot of consideration and a lot of discussion with my husband, and I decided that I would take that position. And that was in 2017 or so. At some point, I can't remember exactly what month. But,
so you've been the director the majority of its existence.
I actually, no, because I left in the middle, because I was director for about a year, and we just did not have the funding to continue supporting my salary. So it went back to 100% volunteer, and Craig Fenton spending most of his time and energy in his personal funds. I mean, there's just any charitable organization, you see times where donations are really coming in. Or sometimes they don't come in so much, and everybody experiences that. And that was kind of where we were at. The entire time that we were assisting people, we were actually working on construction on the building. So Craig bought the building outright, and Transitions is purchasing it from him. It's a 0 interest loan, so that's really convenient for Transitions. We just, like I said, the funding just wasn't there anymore, and so I had to leave. I took another job for about 3 years, and then I came back. So I've been back about a year and a half now. And I'm back in the director and CEO capacity at this time. So, but yeah, the whole time that we were assisting people, we were also working on construction of this building. So it started out as a creamery back in the 19 something 20s or teens. I can't even remember what year that was started. And then when they closed down the creamery, it became a light industrial machine shop, and then it was a pawn shop. I think most people remember it as a pawn shop. And then it's become a homeless shelter. So the entire inside of the building is new construction. So it's kind of a building within a building. And it's a 21,000 square foot building. So from the street, it looks like it's just this tiny little storefront type of building, but it actually goes back into the bluff, and then there's the second floor. And so we renovated the entire ground floor. We've got a couple of offices. We've got a big dining room kitchen area, 4 bedrooms that sleep up to 13 people. That's our fire code allowance. We have a chapel, which is probably all of our favorite room in the entire building. It's just a really nice room. And then we also have a little, we call it the lounge, kind of a space. Mm-hmm. So once we got to the point of nearing the end of construction and then opening, we discontinued those other programs, the rent assistance, the furniture. The furniture we don't do anymore because we didn't put a sprinkler system in the other parts of the building, and that would be where we would store our donated furniture. And so because of fire codes and safety and all of that, we have to have a sprinkler. We just, that wasn't an expense that we wanted to take on at that time. So all of our funding goes directly into serving literally homeless folks. And there's all these technical, how do you qualify as literally homeless? And we have to follow HUD guidelines because we do get federal HUD funding, which comes to us through the state of Iowa. And some of those rules, we have to take everybody. We can't deny someone because they're a drug addict. We can't deny them because they came in intoxicated or they don't have the appropriate ID. We can't require them to do services. So we can't require them to meet with a caseworker. But when people do come in, we encourage that very strongly. Within the first couple, we kind of give people a couple days to get their feet under them and orient. And then we've got a case manager who does a really good job of trying to steer people towards, what are your goals? What do you need to achieve those goals? And for some people, we could have some people who've been living on the street for years or a couple months, and they've lost everything. So they have no ID, they have no social security card. And anybody who's ever gotten a job knows that you cannot get a job unless you have your ID and your social security card. And if you don't have those things, it can be kind of a process to get those. And the key thing that you need to get those is an address. And so if you're homeless, you don't have an ID and a social security card, then you don't have any of the pieces that you need to start that process. So a lot of the times that's where we start. Sometimes it's more challenging than others. We've had to really get creative on figuring out how we can get a hold of the documentation that people need to prove their name change when they got married, just all kinds of things like that. So we start there, or we start where they're further on down the path. Employment for some folks. For a lot of folks, it's healthcare and mental health care. Frequently, it started to get kind of weigh on my heart that people seem to be confusing mental health issues and homelessness, or addiction issues and mental health issues and homelessness. I see on the Facebook chatter groups all the time, homeless person here, there, doing these things around town. And the first question that is coming into my head, how do you know that person is homeless? Because I'll tell you what, I see a lot of homeless people every day, and none of them look the same. They can look clean and well kept and put together. They can be carrying bags. They can be empty-handed. You just never really know when you see somebody. But oftentimes those three things do go together. And so we see a lot of folks who we've just got to find the right services for them. Whether that be connecting them with counseling associates who can get them into programs and other services, or Optime, who can again, more programs and services, or maybe they're diabetic and they don't have their insulin and that's causing erratic behavior. So we usually take a first couple days to kind of feel out what they need, ask a lot of questions, have conversation, get to know them. And it's a real team effort. We've got a lot of volunteers on staff. Like I mentioned, our case manager. We just hired a few new staff members that are shelter monitors, and everybody kind of works together to learn the needs and the personalities of our folks, because we've got a communal living situation. So that is a really stressful environment. I don't know if you've ever lived with 12 other people before, but I've only lived with 6 other people at the most at one time, and that is a very stressful situation. And I can't imagine having 12 roommates. So there's usually some conflict that has to be maneuvered through that. And some folks just can't, they can't live that way. Mm-hmm. And so we do have to, ask people to leave. We have to discharge for less than great reasons. We hate it, mm-hmm. And we never, ever want to turn anybody away. And we will exhaust every opportunity or option or second chances in order to make something work out for a client before we discharge them. But the number one concern is always safety, staff and clients there. So yeah, I mean, you never really know what you're going to get in a situation, but we just try to do the best that we can. And we really connect with those other resources in the community. Because really what we have to offer is a place to sleep for the night, shower, laundry, get cleaned up, have good food in your belly, and then access those resources. Mm-hmm. And some time, because I think time is a commodity that, we all know time is very valuable, but I think when you're homeless, I think it becomes even more valuable, because everything takes time. It takes time to access this program or get this piece of documentation and such. So we are flexible with our time limit on what we allow people to do. As long as they're making progress towards that end goal, we can adjust how much time they get.
I love the point you're making about how each person is different.
Absolutely.
And it's real easy to keep your distance and generalize mm-hmm. about whether we're talking about homeless or any other, however we group people.
Yeah.
But when you take the time to get to know them, you can see that there's unique needs that each person has, Absolutely. Regardless of where you are. But it also gives you greater empathy.
Absolutely.
for those people, regardless of what type of people we're talking about. Do you have any stories of, I don't know if I want to use the word success, but that's the word that comes to my mind, but positive stories of how transitions has impacted people?
Yeah, absolutely. So our go-to for our biggest positive impact story is probably the guy that is currently working for us as our building manager and case manager. He came to us just about a year ago. I think it was a year in early May. And he was homeless. He had made a series of choices that led to him not having a place to live. He was an alcoholic. And he also had to have a couple of extra shots at it. You know, he was not a perfect, did every step in the order he should have the whole way through, but he found direction. He found purpose. He found people who cared enough to give him that shot. And so I think that's the biggest impact that transitions has for people, is to be able to just, we open up our hearts and our doors to people to give them those opportunities. And so Michael has just, he has completely turned his life around, and he's able to show true empathy. I can hear a lot of what he's saying in his office while I'm trying to concentrate on my administrative stuff. And I find myself just kind of, and like he can connect and understand, like the alcohol addiction issues, the health issues and the mental health issues. He's a veteran with PTSD. So, he's a great example of not only taking yourself out of that ultimately the worst situation that you could probably find, one of the worst that you could find yourself in, turning that around and then being able to give back and help people. More recently, we had a lady come to us. She was in a domestic situation. She actually came from over the river in Illinois. And so when she was here, she hadn't worked in years because in her relationship, the man she was with had taken care of her and provided for all the financials. But one of the first things that she did, she went and got a job. Next day she comes in and says, "Oh, I got another job to work," because that other job was only 4 days a week. So I got another 2-day-a-week job. And so she was just working away. But because of her having come from Illinois and only recently relocated into Iowa, she didn't qualify for some of the rapid rehousing programs because it's kind of a state-by-state situation. So we just gave her more time. So she worked 6 days a week. And then when she wasn't at work, she was helping around the shelter, doing all kinds of stuff. And, it took her a little bit longer to get through the program than it does some folks. But that's because she had less assistance from outside programs. Mm-hmm. But she just recently, I think it's been 3 weeks ago, she moved into an apartment. And just to see the transformation in her from being so, I guess, beaten down in her situation, and giving her the helps and supports and just guidance and direction. And when the last day she was with us and when she left, it was almost like we had a different person on our hands. Mm-hmm. And so we've had a single dad who came to us, and we kind of had to do some maneuvering with different people in different rooms to make room to get dad and baby in there. And he was beside himself. He didn't have anywhere else to turn. He'd exhausted every other resource that he'd had. And so he literally took our last bed in the shelter. Mm-hmm. And then again, somebody else who just worked to get the resources. And within a couple of weeks, he had childcare assistance and a new apartment and new part-time job, and he just needed time, space, and support to get those things going and get it together. So he came back in a couple weeks ago and to see if any mail had come in for him, and we're like, "Oh, hey, baby," So that was, we've had families and children, and that is really hard because, being a parent myself, just having compassion for children in general. Knowing that there are children who end up in this situation too, that's kind of hard to work with. But it's nice that when we can help them and get them on to a more positive situation. So
those are great. Thank you for sharing those, and particularly recent and ongoing stories of how you guys are having an impact. You've talked about this a few times, particularly with prayer and everything. Can you just succinctly tell us, why are you part of Transitions?
God put me here. I firmly believe that. Like I said, I never came looking for this job. It has found me both times that I've come to it. And after I left the first time, I thought, I can't deal with the instability of working for something that I know may not be funded next month. But yet I still came back because I just felt like my heart was just getting tugged that way. And I was like, yes, God, I'm going to do it. I'll do what you tell me to do. And every time I think it's getting tough and I don't know, how is this going to work? He always comes through. And so I just keep working on faith and doing what I can and praying for him to fill in the rest. So I know that's why I'm supposed to be there. So
if someone wants to get involved in Transitions, what are some options for them?
Well, we have all kinds of options. Like I said, we have a lot of volunteers that come down. I've got some of my best volunteers are some of my board members, which is kind of why they became board members, because they were so involved. I mean, they have such a heart for it, and they'll come in, they'll serve meals, they'll clean toilets, they'll just have conversations with people. So, to be a volunteer, we like them to be over 18. But if they're under, we have a couple of, a 16-year-old right now, and she just comes in with her mom, and so they just, it can be something, even being an overnight monitor for the shelter, because we have 24/7 people in the building. Just because, like I said, communal living, you got to have that security and that safety, and that you never kind of know what's going to pop up. You have a toilet overflow or something like that. So we need people in all capacities. We have a couple fundraisers that we're doing. We have like a fundraiser at Pizza Ranch coming up in June. So we'll have a few extra people that aren't normally volunteering on a regular basis will come in for events like that and help out with things like that. Yard work, just really any capacity for volunteering. But of course we always need financial assistance. We are a charity. We do rely on donations and grants. So that's always an ongoing need.
Are people able to give online through your website?
Absolutely. We have PayPal. So if you go to transitionsdmc.org, you can click on that link.
And we'll link to your website in the show notes.
Awesome.
And so what's the address of Transitions?
515 South Main Street, Burlington.
We'll put that in the comments as well, so people could mail you a check. They could give online. They could stop in and
Absolutely.
hand deliver.
Yeah, and we're always happy to give tours. We love giving tours of the building because then people can see what it is that their money's working towards. And usually there's residents around too, and they can kind of, the residents you'd think would be like, oh, I don't want them to see me, but it's really never like that because they're grateful, and like a lot of people bring in food to donate, and they'll just jump right up and run out and help carry stuff in, or I can do the yard work, staff doesn't have to do it. So I always encourage people to come down and just kind of see what we're about. Come in and chat with us, or just ask whatever questions they have, because we can talk about it, but I think when people finally see it for themselves, they're like, oh, okay, that's what this is.
So from what I'm hearing is basically anybody can volunteer.
Absolutely.
Whether it's manual labor with yard work, or sitting and talking with residents, cooking, cleaning. So if you're breathing, there's a space that you could potentially
if you're breathing and you have a heart for the work, we'll take you.
Yeah. So, and because a lot of times we come up with excuses, or I'm not good at that area, good in this area, and someone may not be comfortable talking with others, but there are other things they could do.
Absolutely.
So I just want to make sure people have no excuses.
Yeah.
And so we're here advocating for the work that you guys are doing, and we're thankful for it. And I want to make sure that people don't miss the opportunity to volunteer, because as you said, God put it on your heart to be there. And I think that's we need to be open to how God is leading with that. Is there anything else with transitions that you would like to share?
Well, one of the questions that you had raised that we to think about was the future of transitions. So we, like I mentioned before, we started because we knew we needed more capacity for emergency beds. We kind of knew in the beginning, but we really know now that those emergency beds aren't quite going to be enough. We've got a great population in the community that's growing, seems like daily, of folks that, I just this morning, there's all the Facebook chatter about somebody laying under the sign at Walgreens on Division, and those are folks that are going to need just a little bit more than the temporary emergency shelter. So Transitions is working on trying to find ways to partner with other organizations. We're writing grants and kind of exploring options for more permanent supported housing. We've got, like I said, we've got a second story, so we're going to write a grant to try to get that renovated and do some longer term, maybe more individualized apartment style type of housing. There's a group that's working on a tiny house concept so that people can have their own personalized space. So we're always looking to wrap around the current services that we have and just better serve people, and the people who really need it the absolute most. So anybody who has any interest in helping in any way, whether it be on an emergency basis or on a ongoing, we're always open to anybody who has a heart for it. So that's our future.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Well, that's a compelling vision as far as I'm concerned of what you guys are dreaming about, praying over, and just working towards. Well, thank you for your work with Transitions and sharing with us today. I believe in the work you're doing, because one of the things as Christians that we believe is that every person is valuable because they're created in the image of God.
Amen.
So regardless of where anybody is in their life, regardless of the worth that society thinks a person has or doesn't have, that person is valuable because they're made in the image of God, and that's where their worth resides. And so as followers of Jesus, when we can show other people that they matter, I think that's a huge step in sharing Jesus with them. So thank you for being on our podcast today. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for the work that you were doing. We appreciate it. Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Be on the lookout for how God does uncommon work in common life. And please subscribe to never miss an episode.